Hi, welcome to another video. This is the TCL 10L, the TCL 10 5G, and the TCL 10 Pro. This is a quick hands-on video with these phones. They were shown at CES, but I finally got my hands on them with a little bit more time, and honestly, they're pretty awesome. So let's walk you through the specs and the differences between them, and also show you what the phones look like. The 10L has a 6.53-inch display, and so does the 10 5G. In fact, the 10L and 10 5G look pretty much identical in terms of physical design. And then the 10 Pro has a 6.47-inch display, so it's a little different. You'll notice that they look really good. TCL is very good at making displays, but there are some differences. The 10L and the 10 5G have an IPS LCD panel. The 10 Pro has an AMOLED panel, and you can see it has a teardrop notch here instead of the hole punch you see on the 10L and 10 5G. It's also narrower with slight less bezels on the left and right, and it's thinner as well and has a slightly different industrial design. I'll show you that in a second. In terms of specs, this is a Snapdragon 665 on the 10L, 765G on the 10 5G, and 675 on the 10 Pro. So in terms of memory, they all have 6 gigs of RAM. The 10L has 64 gigs of storage, and the 10 5G and 10 Pro have 128 gigs of storage. In terms of battery, the L has 4,000 milliamp hour battery, and the 5G and the Pro have 4,500 milliamp hour batteries. So that's kind of the initial differences. In terms of cameras, the camera on the front of the 10L is a 16 megapixel. It's the same camera as on the 10 5G. And the 10 Pro has a 24 megapixel front-facing camera. So that's essentially the differences between these. Obviously, the prices are very aggressive on all three of these. $249 for the 10L, less than $500 for the 10 5G, and $449 for the 10 Pro. And the L and the Pro will be available in May. We're not quite sure yet when the 5G is coming, but it'll be coming soon. Let me show you each phone individually. So the 10L, as you can see, has this really gorgeous display, and that's because TCL makes televisions, so they have their own display here. It's an IPS panel. It's really beautiful. You can see nothing to complain about. The back is really interesting, and I'm going to talk about the differences between the cameras. All three phones have 4 cameras in the back with a dual flash setup. There's a fingerprint sensor in the back of the 10L and the back of the 10 5G, but an in-display sensor in the 10 Pro. So this is like this pearlescent color. You can see it's got this metal finish here on the sides. On the right-hand side is a volume rocker and power button. On the bottom is some grills for microphone, speaker, and a USB Type-C port. On the left-hand side, you've got what might be a Google Assistant button and the SIM tray. And on top, you have a headphone jack and secondary microphone. It's pretty obvious to me that this isn't metal. It's plastic with a silver finish on it, which is a little unfortunate. Not sure if the rear is glass or plastic. Feels like it could be plastic, but this does feel pretty premium and nice in hand. Now, let's take a look at the 5G, and you'll see how similar it is to the 5L. It does have this very cool pattern. It's this blue thing. This does feel like it might be maybe glass this time around, but as you can see, very similar layout here. We've got the exact same setup with the same cameras, same fingerprint sensor, but because it has a slightly larger battery, the 5G feels a little thicker to me in hand. But yeah, if you look at them close to each other, you can see the same camera setup here in terms of 4 cameras, dual flash, and that fingerprint sensor. Now, the model you're all curious about, which I think is the most premium feeling one, and definitely feels like glass and metal, this one, is the 10 Pro. And this one also has 4 cameras in the back, as you can see here, but again, fingerprint sensor is in display, and you can see the camera is flush. There's no pod sticking out. The flashes are round, and there's a little window there for what might be a laser autofocus module. Very nice frosted glass finish here. This feels very much like glass to me and pretty premium. These are very slippery right now, so before I flip them over again, let me talk about these cameras. This is essentially the same setup with all four. You've got a main sensor, an ultra-wide, a macro, and a depth sensor. That's main sensor, ultra-wide, macro, and depth. There are slight differences though. So the 10L has a 48 megapixel main, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide, and a 2 megapixel macro along with a 2 megapixel depth sensor. The 10 5G has a 48 megapixel main, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide, but a 5 megapixel macro, which is an update, and a depth sensor. I'm pretty sure that actually the depth sensor is somewhere in the middle. Then the 10 Pro has a 64 megapixel main, a 16 megapixel ultra-wide, a 5 megapixel macro, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. Now I'm always pointing at these in the order that I'm saying, but it's not the right order necessarily. I'm not quite sure what these lenses all are. It's hard to tell, but 4 cameras with slight variations in spec. So let me flip these over again. As you can see, they are fingerprint magnets. Nothing unusual here for these kind of phones. And finally, the 10 Pro. So as you can see, these are pretty lovely phones. Really nothing to complain about. I showed you the edge of the 10L, so let's quickly have a look at the edges of the 10 5G. Same setup here. You got a Google Assistant or Assistant button of some kind with a SIM tray. You've got speakers, microphone, and USB-C on the bottom. You've got power lock and volume rocker on the right, headphone jack and secondary mic on top. This does still feel like plastic to me, the chassis on this, so might not be plastic in the end. Then this does feel a lot more premium than the 10 Pro. This does feel like metal to me, anodized aluminum. It's green. You can see the assistant button on the left. You got a SIM tray on the bottom with USB Type-C and speaker microphones, and volume rocker and power lock key on the right-hand side, and then of course headphone jack. And it looks like an infrared transmitter and secondary microphone here on top. So that's a pretty interesting layout. And again, at these prices, I think these phones are going to be very interesting. It's nice to see that TCL is kind of getting into the market and getting serious with these. So I'm looking forward to reviewing these at some point. And until then, stay tuned. Obviously, we will have more videos on the channel. Please subscribe, like this video, tell your friends, click the little notification icon, comment below. And remember, this is a complement, a supplement to the Mobile Tech Podcast at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're also on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify. Please subscribe to the podcast so that you can hear what I think about these phones when I finally get them to review. And until next time, stay tuned for more videos. Cheers, everybody.